On this episode of Long Riders Radio, we're going to talk with Tim Masterson, who rode I-40 one into the other in less than 40 hours. Coming up! Support for Long Riders Radio comes from DiscountRamps.com. DiscountRamps.com offers a huge selection of power sports products for your ATV, UTV, motorcycle, and more. Everything you need to load, haul, or transport your power sports toys. Long Riders Radio listeners can save 15% off their order by using coupon code LONG. That's LONG at DiscountRamps.com. Well, hey there, everyone. Justin here. And, wow, just all of a sudden the sun came out at my house. It hasn't been out in like 3 weeks. Sorry, just got distracted there for a second. On this month's episode, we are going to talk with Tim Masterson, who is well known in the IBA world. But Tim did a first-time ride. He did I-40 one end to the other in less than 40 hours. Now, after I recorded this interview with him, I thought, you know, he really could have made his life a lot easier if he would have chose to do this ride on I-70, because it would have been like 400 miles less and he would have had 30 more hours to do it. But hey, he wanted a challenge, so he decided to do I-40. And we're going to talk to him about that, as well as his new motorcycle, which I found absolutely fascinating and can't wait to see some of the certificate rides and beyond that he's going to be attempting coming up here. So let's get into the interview with Tim. All right. Well, on the line today, we have a gentleman who, after reading his blog, I kind of questioned his sanity a little bit, but man, he has done some pretty epic rides, it looks like, and is going to be doing some epic rides. He just completed a 40-40 insanity ride, and that's I-40 end to end in 40 hours. Tim Masterson, welcome to Long Riders Radio. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I've been a long-distance motorcycle rider for since 2001, when I got accepted into the Iron Butt Association. But I've been riding motorcycles since I was 19 years old. Got my first motorcycle in 1969. I just came back from a short tour in Korea, and they stationed me at Fort Benning, Georgia. I didn't have any transportation, but I did manage to save $850 while I was over there. And it was pretty hard to do, but I managed to do it. Well, I went down in Columbus, Georgia, and bought a brand new Suzuki T200 for $495. That was on a Thursday afternoon. On Saturday morning, I signed out in April and rode it home to El Cajon, California. Took me 4 days, 3 nights. I slept on the road 2 nights, and the last night I stayed in a hotel for $12. It was a pretty good hotel, too, for $12 in 1969. And I was hooked on long-distance riding after that. Well, with a career and a family and everything, it was hard to consistently ride a motorcycle as I was growing up. But along the turn of the century, things changed for me, and I had a whole lot more time to ride, and I've been enjoying long distance riding ever since.
Awesome. Well, I want to talk about this ride you just completed, this 40-40 ride. Can you explain what exactly it is? Because I just gave a real brief synopsis of it, but talk about this ride and who came up with the idea.
Well, the idea is the brainchild of IBA, Iron Butt Association legend, Dave McQueenie. If you're in the Iron Butt Association, everybody knows who Dave McQueenie is. He's got over 2 million miles of long-distance motorcycle events under his belt, documented by BMW. And for the longest time, he was thinking about this crazy ride of going the entire length of Interstate 40 from Wilmington, North Carolina to Barstow, California, or the other way around, in under 40 hours. In the Iron Butt world, that's kind of a hell yeah, let's do that. But most people would say, we all ride interstates, love them or hate them, we ride them. And to most people, that is about the most unappealing thing there is. Well, riding an interstate that long. Some people get bored with it. But to the long distance riding community, maybe a lot of them, it's really a challenge. So we were at the Senior Butt Rally in Denison back in September, and I said, Dave, you've been talking about this thing. Let's get it going. So he came up with the rules and the protocols. He's invented quite a few rides, the 50cc Quest and a few others. But this is his latest brainchild. And I said, Dave, I'd be honored to verify it and ride it and validate it for you. So we set the date. It was late November. And I kept monitoring the weather and everything and picked the day so that I could use it as a ride-in to the annual Pink's Ride to Eat hot dog thing out in Hollywood. So the idea was to do the 40-40, arrive in Barstow on Friday, and Saturday morning get up and ride into Pink's and celebrate the event with a hot dog.
Okay, so let's just some specs about this. I-40, according to Wikipedia, is 2,559.25 miles.
Pretty close.
And on your blog, you calculated down every last little bit of this. So talk about like what's your average speed, things like that.
Sure. Well, when I did the ride, my GPS measured 2,563.7 miles. And I started at 3 o'clock, 3:49 in the morning, Central Time. That was 4 o'clock or almost 5 o'clock in Wilmington. And I finished, that was on a Thursday, and I finished on a Friday at 6:30 my time. And it was about 4:30 or so out in California. Total riding time was 38 hours and 34 minutes. My overall average, which includes all my stops for gas and the break that I took in Amarillo, was 66.6 miles per hour. So that's what I was averaging the entire distance.
And you needed to, was it 63 miles an hour you had to average the whole time?
Yes. If you take the entire distance of I-40 and divide it by the 40 hours, it gets up to about 63 or 64 miles an hour that you have to maintain.
Yeah, just for context, a bun burner gold pace is, if memory serves, is 62 miles an hour?
Yeah, 62.5. Right?
So you're going faster than a bun burner gold pace for 40 hours.
Well, it's pretty easy on the interstate. The only challenge is to do it consistently, of course.
Yeah.
With the weather, the traffic, the detours, all the things that are inherent in riding an interstate, that's what eats up the time.
Yeah. So talk about your planning for this, because I'm guessing you glossed over a lot there with that you just rode out to Wilmington and decided to ride back to Barstow. I mean, I'm guessing pretty much everything about this was planned out pretty carefully.
The planning technique that I've been using, it's pretty much standard in the iron butt world, is you lay out the route. Route's already set for the 40-40, just stay on Interstate 40.
Yeah. And
then you look for refueling opportunities at your gas range. And the fuel range on my BMW R1200 GS Adventure without an aux tank at interstate speeds is about 270 to 300 miles, depending on the pace. Mm-hmm. So the very first thing I did was I planned my start gas station where I was going to get a dated business receipt. And then I just plotted out every 270 miles a gas station and identified it on Google. And it's important when you're doing these kinds of timed rides that you get a fuel station that is on the right side of the road that you can really see from the interstate, right? Because, if you're riding in Maryland or something and it says there's gas here, it may
6
take
miles.
4 miles to get off the interstate, right? Well, that's where Google Maps comes in handy, and you can get down to the street view and you can see, what's a good gas station to stop at. Easy on, easy off. That's the idea. Yep. So I did that all the way out to the finish. And I wasn't going to use these as exactly the spots, but that I was going to stop, because if I had a little more range, I'd push it down a little more. But it really worked out pretty good for me. So that's the basic technique. And I had 9 stops between the start point and the finish point, for a total of 11 all told. And by doing that, it helped out a whole lot.
How much wiggle room did you allow yourself in your planning?
Well, it was 40 hours, and I used base camp. And at base camp, you have the opportunity, once you put in the waypoints, you can time the route out.
Yep.
By that, I mean you can click on the first departure point, and you can put the date and the time that you leave there, and it will calculate what time you're going to arrive at every subsequent waypoint on the route. And on each one of those waypoints, in between the start and the finish, you can put a layover time or a dwell time, how much time you're going to spend there. And when I calculate a fuel stop, it's from throttle roll off at the exit to getting back to speed when you return to the interstate. So I don't count just the time I'm at the gas station. There's the deceleration time and the acceleration time. So you add those two together. I can do a on-the-clock fuel stop in under 5 minutes. If I have to go into the restroom or anything, it's another 2 minutes. I don't ever buy anything when I'm on a clock like this, because that takes up 2 minutes in itself. So in the base camp route properties, I added 5 or 7 minutes, alternating each one to each of the waypoints. And that gave me an overall time that I was going to arrive out in California. Well, I arrived at Barstow at the finishing point at 1833 Central Time, and my planning was 1857. So I was a little early.
Yeah.
I picked up a little time.
But it sounds like I'm doing the math quick in my head there. So you had given yourself an hour of wiggle room even in your planning.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah. An hour of slack time.
Yeah.
And that also included a rest stop in yeah, I'm
going to get to that in a little bit here.
Okay.
So one of the things you did too is you planned a Bun Burner Gold inside this ride, which, I mean, if you take essentially 2,600 miles divided by 2, that's 1,300 miles. How come you decided to do a Bun Burner Gold? And from your blog, it sounded like that was pretty important to you.
Well, you always want to capitalize on the opportunity when you're doing iron butt rides like this. And putting the Bun Burner Gold inside this larger ride is called nesting. So the rules on nesting a ride within a larger ride in the Iron Butt Association is that the nested ride can't be part of the normal ride. So like a Saddle Sore 1000, if you're doing a Bun Burner Gold, right, you don't get a Saddle Sore 1000 too, because that was part of the ride. Well, on this particular ride, it was possible to nest and get credit for a Bun Burner Gold. So I said, hell yeah, let's do that. I'm going to stop in Amarillo for a rest stop anyway, and that's a little bit past Bun Burner Gold territory, so just make it happen that way.
So if you had to do it over again, would you do that? Because I'm going back to the Bun Burner Gold I did, and that last 200 miles of that Bun Burner Gold was not a lot of fun. And would you do it again that same way, or would you stop a little bit earlier?
Of course. I'd always go for the go. I've been going for the gold for a long time, and sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. But this is pretty easy.
Okay.
It would have depended. Now, it would have depended if I had to get off of the interstate or I had a mechanical thing, of course.
Yeah.
But the long distance God smiled on me, and there was bridge closings at the border of North Carolina and Tennessee, but they opened them back up. So I was able to avoid the detour that was planned, thanks to some help from a long distance rider.
Well, so it sounded like the first part of this ride was definitely a challenge between traffic, road construction, and the weather. Sounded like it sucked pretty much most of the way.
Yeah, looking back on the ride, the best part of the ride is when I came out of the mountains in Flagstaff into the desert, and the temperature warmed up above 40.
You didn't know that was part of this challenge? It was 40 degrees on Interstate 40 for 40 hours?
Yeah, I had paid attention to the weather. I've ridden in cold weather a lot, but this was definitely a challenge. I started out in the 60 degrees and low and high 50s in Wilmington early in the morning. And by the time I got past Raleigh, it had warmed up into the 50s and the 60s a little bit more, and the sun was out. And I got across into Tennessee, and then I started to hit clouds and a big thunderstorm patch. And it just was like one thunderstorm after another with about maybe a 20 to 40 mile break in between. And then it was just drizzling the whole way. My normal riding gloves were wet, but the temperature was okay. And I just kept going. By the time I got to past Memphis, I got out of the rain and went through the cold front and stopped, put on my dry gloves, my big heavy ones, and I got heated gear. I don't have heated gloves or heated pants or heated socks. I generally just ride with my heated jacket, and it's good for me. And the temperature I just kept watching it drop. It dropped into the 50s, and then there's the 40s, and then in the 30s. And by the time I got to Oklahoma in the middle of the night, past midnight is a miserable place to ride, especially when it's desolate, it's cold, and you just want to get there. So I was really looking forward to my rest stop in Amarillo. I stopped in Oklahoma City to get gas and got off the motorcycle, unplugged, got off the motorcycle, went into the store and used the facilities. And by the time I was coming back, I was shivering like crazy. And I'm standing there in a motorcycle trying to plug myself back in, and I have to rest my hand on the side of the motorcycle to steady it because it was so cold. And getting back on the road with my heated gear working was back into the comfort zone.
Yeah. So we've traveled with you now across the desolate area of Oklahoma, and you roll into Amarillo where you're planning a rest stop. And I think most people who listen to this show are familiar with the Iron Butt Motel, which is basically the side of the road.
Yeah.
You did it a little bit differently, and I'm not sure what to call it, but where did you spend the night?
Well, I really didn't spend the night. I planned.
Or where did you take your rest, I should say?
I planned the Amarillo stop, and I allocated 4 hours for that. Because that's a great opportunity if you do a bun burner gold and everything's working out, then you've got 4 hours of rest. If you have some issues along the way or you take a little bit more time, then you have the ability to compress that 4 hours and and use it to take up some of the stuff that you did wrong or some of the issues that you had, right? So that's why I planned that 4 hours at Amarillo. I got there at 2 o'clock in the morning and a little bit after 2. It was cold again. I went in and It was at a pilot station. I love pilots, Flying J's and Loves. They're all great because they cater to truckers and they're open all the time, right? So I walk into the Denny's, which nobody's there except a couple of truckers sitting around. And I walk in and the waitress asked me, would I like a menu? I said, no, I'm not going to eat, but I would like some hot water for tea. And I pointed to the far booth in the corner and I said, you see that far booth over there? I'm going to be here for 2 or 3 hours. Do you mind if I just kind of sit over there and maybe even camp out? She said, oh, no, go ahead. No problem. So she brought me her tea. I make my tea. I use some hibiscus, red zinger stuff. Give me some nutrients. Yeah, but anyways, I'm sitting there. I'm still shaking and cold, probably because I didn't eat anything. Needed some calories. So I'm drinking the tea, and I finally get the tea down me, and I warm up. So I have my boonie hat on, and I just still have my electric vest on. I pulled the collar up over my face, I pulled the boonie hat down, and I just sat there and I zonked out for about 2 hours, I guess, in and out. But if you go through a sleep cycle and you burn up some of the adenosine, as far as I could determine, that's the chemical in your brain that builds up that gives you that sleepy feeling. It's a neurochemical. But if you take a cat nap, anybody's ever taken a cat nap, they know that, hey, they wake up and they're nice and refreshed. Well, I got through 45, maybe an hour and a half of that, and it worked out well. Got up, had a cup of coffee, slammed a pecan muffin down my gullet, and got back on the highway. Oh, by the way, I just have to put in a plug for Pilot. They have absolutely the best coffee on the road. They have these new machines that grind it right there and then make the coffee from the beans. So it's just absolutely fabulous, wonderful stuff. I filled it up into my stainless steel thermos drink bottle and just drank coffee all the way through Mexico.
So the question I had is, if you had 4 hours, why not spring for a hotel for that portion of it? And I mean, what was the benefit of just sleeping in the Denny's versus actually getting a hotel and laying down in a bed?
Yeah, I like the hotel, and when I need good quality sleep for a multi-day rally, I'll always do that. But for a little short thing like 40 hours, doing a power nap and maybe 1 or 2 REM cycles is usually enough to get me going. And also the timing of the Amarillo stop was to take advantage of my natural circadian rhythm. I am good, wide awake from 4 o'clock in the morning to about midnight. And if I can get 3 to 4 hours sleep between midnight and 4, I'm good for the whole day. I can't do that consistently day after day after day. You got to get some good quality rest in there. But for a 3-day event, that works just fine for me without compromising safety. And I've been doing these long distance scoots long enough to recognize the telltale warning signs of excess fatigue while riding. Yeah. And I'll pull over and spend 20 minutes with a short cat nap. Close your eyes, get rid of that adenosine, and then you're good for another 5 or 6 hours.
And if memory serves, you did that later in the ride. You pulled over and took like a 10-minute nap. And
yeah. The quickest thing that I notice when I'm getting that the sleep monsters coming back is my eyeballs bounce. Mm-hmm. They don't really bounce in my head, but your vision, you can't control the spine muscles of your eyes to keep the view nice and smooth. When they start bouncing, I know. That's the first sign. That's the best time to do it. Look for an exit and just get something, sit down.
So you mentioned that you had slammed down the pecan muffin. What else did you eat on this ride?
Well, I made some uh, before I left the house. I made 2 containers of trail mix
Hmm.
with lots of nuts, lots of raisins, lots of kind of natural things that I could. I try to avoid candy or added sugar like that. I want to get it in natural states. And I had 2 cans of low sodium V8. So during the ride at one of the stops around 4 or 5 o'clock, I eat one meal a day. I'm an OMAD intermittent fasting kind of guy. And around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock at a gas station, I slammed down one of the V8 juices and opened up my can of trail mix, and I started putting a bunch in my mouth, and that's something I can do when I'm riding. So I had a nice meal cruising down the road, and at the following gas stop, I drank the other V8 juice. So I had a good meal. That's the kind of stuff that I eat, and it worked well for me.
So at any point along the way, I mean, like, and if anyone who wants a lot of like real fine details about this, Tim has a very excellent write up on his blog that I'm going to link to in the show notes for this episode. But did you think you were going to make it at any point?
That's an interesting question, and built into the ride craft that I use is managing the risks. And the risk of having a crash is ever present when you're riding a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to always, that's the first priority, keep the motorcycle flying, keep it going, and don't get into any situation where you increase the risk of having a crash, right? So if I wasn't going to make it, that was the only thing that was going to do. I had confidence in my motorcycle, confidence in my riding ability, and the only thing I didn't have confidence in was the condition of the traffic.
Yeah.
And I was satisfied that the weather was good. It was snowing. It had snowed the night before through New Mexico, the high desert in New Mexico before you get to Moriarty and Albuquerque. And it was just a white blanket. It was absolutely stunning, beautiful watching this sunlight start to hit it early in the morning. The temperature was 24 degrees or something like that. The roads were nice and clean. Icy roads was probably the biggest threat that I had to continuing. But Greg Rice, another legend in the Iron Butt Association, he's just did his 60th Bun Burner Gold, I think. Maybe it's 50. I mean, he does these things, just to go to work, right?
Yep. Yeah.
He has a wonderful Interstate 40 weather link that has towns about every 50 or 80 miles, and you can see the entire weather pattern across the entire length of Interstate 40 by looking at that. And thank you, Greg. I really appreciate that. You're the BBG master. He uses that kind of technique for his BBGs. He plots out that. I mean, if you think about this, riding a motorcycle is like flying a little airplane, but you're only doing it in 2 dimensions. You're not doing it in the third dimension, but you're susceptible to the same thing. So like the stuff that Charles Lindbergh had to contend with flying across the ocean are some of the things that motorcyclists that are doing these long distance rides have to do, so you got to pay attention to those things. So I guess the weather, in answering your question, the weather was probably the only thing that would have slowed me down, and I would have just keep plugging through it. There had been rides where I pulled the trigger and stopped them because of the weather. Very interesting story that I won't go into right now, but my first attempt to do the George Wyman or validate the coast to coast, the San Francisco to New York City in under 80 hours. I got snowed in Evanston, Wyoming, and couldn't go any farther. So I just
that would do it.
Yeah, that would do it. So the weather was the only thing that was going to stop me. The traffic, I filter through traffic. That's a very well chosen word. I generally don't sit in traffic. I just try to filter my way through it when it's you got to crash. And I had that instance. I had to get off of Interstate 40 because the sheriff's department in Arkansas had closed it down because there was a fatality. So they closed it between two exits, and you had to get off and then wind around Interstate 40 through county roads and get back on at the far exit. Those things are inherent in riding interstates. Everybody knows that. And you can generally, it slows you down, but you can generally overcome those things.
So on your blog, the last part of your write-up for this ride, you talk about what your plan is for basically what you're going to be riding in 2020. And this fascinates me, but can you talk about what your new motorcycle is and what your plan is for that motorcycle?
I've recently purchased my 23rd motorcycle of my lifetime, and it's a Janus Gryffin 250, single cylinder, 229 cc's, 14 horsepower, top speed of EPA rated at 70 miles an hour. But I've discovered that's with a tailwind and downhill.
I don't know how they managed to squeeze 14 horsepower out of a 230 cc engine. I mean, that's...
Let me talk about why I bought this slow and underpowered motorcycle in the first place. My long-distance riding has become boring to me. I don't say that in a conceited way. It's just that I'm running out of challenges that are personal to me.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the crazy stuff that some of the top riders do, but I do like to have things that challenge me. And this whole notion of ridecraft is one that intrigues me. And it occurred to me that if I wanted to put challenge back into my long distance riding, what I should do is go back to my roots. And my roots were that first long distance ride I took on a Suzuki T200 across the United States. That really opened up my riding horizons and said, well, now I've got this new standard, the Iron Butt Association and all their rides. Hell, why don't I just try to do as many of those Iron Butt rides on a small motorcycle and train the motorcycle to do these things and turn it into an adventure tour, right?
Yeah.
I've learned how to farkle your motorcycle for long distance. I've learned how to overcome comfort stress and overcome some of the technical issues that riding a motorcycle long distance entails. So I'm just going to do all of that on this little motorcycle. So I talked to the owner or one of the co-founders of Janus Motorcycles. Just a little plug here. Janus Motorcycles is an American motorcycle manufacturer at Goshen, Indiana. And with the exception of their engine and their speedometer, everything was made within 20 miles of their factory in Goshen, Indiana. Their leather stuff are made by Amish craftspeople. A lot of their metal stuff is made by Amish blacksmiths and things like that. So they're really, really a local company up in Goshen.
And this is just to give people a picture of it, it's a scrambler type motorcycle, right?
It's a scrambler. They make three models. They make a cruiser called the Halcyon. They make a cafe racer looking one called the Phoenix. And I'm riding the Gryffin. And they that you can't buy a small engine in the United States unless you go with a Briggs and Stratton, and that's not suitable for a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of people had motorcycles with Briggs and Stratton years ago, I remember. But anyways, they got a little engine that Honda made years ago. They started out with a 125, and then they since boosted that up to a 250. It was called people are familiar with it. The Nighthawk had a CB 250 in it. The very reliable engine that Honda made. Well, Honda since licensed the manufacture of that out to everybody, and it's the new edition of that. The modern edition is called the CG 250. And the Indians make them, Chinese make them, several different Chinese people make them. Well, they buy that motorcycle from a top quality manufacturer in China, and that's the engine that they have in it. In other words, I bought that motorcycle, and I'm going to turn it into an adventure tour. Put GPS on it, put my phone on it, put an aux tank on it, put auxiliary lights on it, put a fuse block to power all my stuff, and a tank bag, and I'm just going to turn it into an adventure touring version of a little street bike, and I'm going to ride as many Iron Butt Association certificate rides as I can on it. I've applied to the organizers of the 2021 Iron Butt Rally to ride the Janus in the 2021 Iron Butt Rally. And I have to earn my way into it. I have to demonstrate that the motorcycle can do it. They have a rule that your motorcycle has to be 35 horsepower or above unless they grant you a waiver. Well, if I can demonstrate that this little motorcycle can start off with a Saddle Sore 1000 and a Bun Burner Silver, coast to coast from Jacksonville to San Diego, ride around Texas, 3,100 miles in 85 hours. I'm going to shoot for under 70 hours, the gold one. In June, I'm planning 48 states in 10 days on the little motorcycle. Well, that to me is the crucible to demonstrate that, one, the motorcycle will be reliable, two, that I could plan it out to where I could successfully do 48 states in 10 days on the little underpowered, slow-speed motorcycle.
So you mentioned a couple of things there when you were listing off of what you're going to add on to it. First, it was an aux tank. So this it's what, a 2-gallon main tank?
2-gallon main tank, and the aux tank that Janus designed is 4 gallons. It looks like a big block. It's a big cube.
Yeah. So you're theoretically going to have 420 miles of range on this?
Yeah. Well, if you take their fuel miles per gallon, probably, so 70 miles a gallon. But I don't think it's going to get that, not with the weight that I have on it.
True. Yeah.
And it's been a long time since I rode a low-powered motorcycle, so I'm going to have to train myself to it. It's crazy. I'm stalling the thing out because I forgot to turn the gas on. I haven't done fine C on a motorcycle, fuel, ignition, neutral, engine. I haven't done all them small motorcycle things in a long time, so I have to retrain myself. But I'm not sure what the fuel range is going to be on the motorcycle, and that's what some of the things that I'm going to spec out on it.
Testing.
Janus gave me 3 other sprockets that I can rear sprockets that I can try to get the best mix of fuel range and top speed. So I'm going to do run out of gas testing on it at all 3 of those sprockets to see which one gives me the optimal mix.
As a side note, Tim has a amazing write-up on his run out of gas tests on his website too, which I would recommend everyone read. It's amazing. The other question I had about the Janus is you'd mentioned you're going to add a lot of electrical stuff onto it. What's its ability to support a lot of electronics?
Well, that's a very good question, and I asked the Janus technical folks what the output was, and at 5,000 RPM, it's 210 watts. At 3,000, it's like 190 something, and it goes on down from there. About 110 watts at idle, right? So I'm not going to be out running around at idle. The biggest thing that sucks juice that I have is my gerbing jacket. That's 75 watts, and the only time I'm going to be doing that is when I'm hauling ass down the road. So there's going to be plenty. Janus folks estimate that the motorcycle requires 50 watts to power all of its normal lights. It has LEDs on it. It doesn't have any standard.
Oh, that's good.
Filament bulbs. They replace those are all low draw. They're like milliamps as far as voltage that they take. So I've got, and the other things that I have as a draw are my smartphone, 15 amps probably at the most.
15 watts.
50 watts, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
15, 15, and my GPS, which is like 10.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything else.
Huh.
Just those two.
I'm foreseeing a checklist on this bike where it's going to be, all right, slowing down, turn this, make sure this is off, this is off, this is off, this is off, and then turn this back on, turn this back on, turn this back on once you get up to speed again.
Well, I've already had to think all that out for both not only the electronics, but for the fuel. I mean, I've got this 4-gallon gas tank in the back, 4 gallons plus the gas tank is going to weigh about 30 pounds. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, well, what's the best procedure to ride with? So I came up, I'm going to run everything out of the gas tank, out of the aux tank first, and it has a standard fuel select valve on it that's on a motorcycle, same one they put on the main tank. So it has a built-in reserve, right? So I just put the fuel on. When it runs out, then I switch to the main tank and get a couple 100 miles out of that, and I start looking for a gas station. So that's kind of what I have to do with the fuel, and it has its own reserve. So I got 2 reserves, like driving around with 2 little quart bottles, you know. So I have to work that all into my fuel range planning. I'm really spoiled. The R1200 GS Adventure BMW motorcycle has the most accurate fuel range calculator I've ever seen on any bike. I mean, you can literally increase your fuel range by dropping your speed down and watch the fuel range go up. It's so accurate.
Yeah.
I don't have that anymore. I just got to wait till the dang thing runs out of gas and use my trip meters on everything, right? So I got to have 2 trip meters, one for the aux, one for the main. But the electronic stuff, the only issue that I foresee having is when it's cold, when I'm wearing my heated gear, when I get down to where I'm stopping to turn it off. But I'm putting supplemental gauges on the motorcycle. I have one gauge that measures both the voltage and the current, which is the number of amps that's being sucked down. And I have a little battery light that I'm connecting to the motorcycle. I have an outside air temperature. I have the cylinder head temperature and a small tachometer and hours of operation gauge. All of that's on a little 4x4 metal plate that sits between my phone and my GPS. That'll give me all the important data about how the motorcycle is performing. So if I see my little battery light come on, and I just turn off my juice, does that mean it's pulled down below 11 volts?
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about as I'm reading this is I would be willing to bet, and I'm trying to think of another bike that would, but I gotta think this is if you get drawn, this will be one of the few carbureted bikes doing an IBR. I can't think. I'm trying to think of another bike that's carbureted.
Yeah,
right now.
Kurt Warden's
Yeah, that's true.
epic ride on 3 iron butt rallies on a Ninja 250.
Yeah.
I've talked with Kurt, and he's mentoring me on some of the finer points of riding a small powered motorcycle, carbureted. He had the advantage. The Ninja 250 will go 110 miles an hour, so speed was not an issue with him. Wear and tear on the bike was, and burning out tires was, those kinds of things, and having a carburetor was, because some of the times he went up into high elevations, and he had put on a mixture knob that he could make it richer, make it leaner based on his altitude, and get better performance out of it. Well, I'm just going to try to do it with the stock carburetor and just do my route planning to compensate for those kinds of things. Add a little more time. If I have to go a little slower, I do. It's all built into the Ridecraft stuff.
Well, I hope 2 things. 1, I hope you get drawn. 2, I hope I get drawn so I can come and see you and riding this bike, because this is just awesome. I think this is so cool, and I cannot wait to get the chance to see what this bike it looks like after you've got it completely finished. And I mean, you're putting a FLIR display on this. That's awesome.
I've had that FLIR since 2013. I don't leave home without my FLIR or my electric gear. So.
Well, Tim, on this podcast, we finish up each interview asking each guest the same series of 12 questions. We call them the LD Dozen. You game to go?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. First question. And you actually kind of answered this already, but what was your first motorcycle, and why did you pick that motorcycle?
Well, it was a Suzuki T200, 2 cylinders, 2-stroke, and it had a top speed of about 60 miles an hour also. And I got it because it was cheap. $495 in April of 1969. I got a premium helmet, Bell helmet, for $19.95.
Wow. I was trying to do the math in my head there of how much you had left over after you took that first trip. You still had some left over, it sounds like.
Yeah, I just wanted to go home on leave.
Yeah.
I didn't know you weren't supposed to ride a small CC underpowered motorcycle. Only idiots do that kind of stuff.
Well, question number 2 is going to be, I'm assuming this ride we just were talking about, where did you take your first overnight ride? I'm assuming it was home to California.
Well, actually, I rode somebody else's bike when I was 16 years old. I was raised in El Cajon, California. And me and my friends, I didn't have a motorcycle. I couldn't afford one, but I got to ride somebody else's. And we used to go down to Tecate and drink beers for 20 cents a bottle. When you're a young kid. I was young and dumb and stupid, right? But one time we slept in the desert in Southern California. And that was my first overnight trip on a motorcycle, I guess. But the real one was when I rode from Fort Benning, Georgia to El Cajon, California. I guess that would fit more what your question is designed to get.
I don't know. I think your first answer is technically your first overnight ride. We'll count it. All right. Question number 3. What is or was your day job? What pays for your LD riding habit?
Well, I've had the good fortune of having 2 solid careers. I had one career in the United States Army, spent 23 years, 3 months, 13 days, retired in 1993, and then went to work as a stockbroker with Nylife Securities. I went into the Army, a high school dropout, juvenile delinquent, and got out with a master's degree in business and an undergraduate in accounting. So the Army was very good to me, and the Army straightened me out. I would have probably been in jail or a hippie out on the beach as one of the homeless folks out in California if I lived as long as I did now without the Army. So the Army squared me away, and I did my second career for from 93 to about 2006. Moved from Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia in 2003 and settled here in Texas. And I stopped working in 2006 and became the house butch for a while. And now I call myself unemployed on a fixed income. I'll be 70 years old in September of this year. So I'm basically retired.
All right. Question number 4. What is your favorite non-motorcycling hobby?
Oh, golly. I've just been eat up with motorcycles for a long time. I'm not sure. I don't think I have another hobby. I like listening to music. I like watching YouTube videos on astrophysics and stuff like that, and nutrition. And I just don't know if I have another hobby.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I really don't.
Question number 5. What is your favorite road?
Route 50, US 50 through Nevada, the loneliest highway in America. And the one that runs from Shiprock in Arizona up to Moab past Monument Valley. I could just ride those things all the time. Anywhere west of the Mississippi and east of the Sierra Nevadas, I just love.
All right, question number 6 is the flip side of that. What's your least favorite road? And typically, this is where somebody says the interstate. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not going to be your answer.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. That's correct. I don't mind interstates. To me, they're just tools. It's one of the things that you use when you route. But my least favorite place to ride is New England. The only time I've ever been up there is when I was on the clock during one of my iron butt rallies. And I don't like riding in New England. It's just too crowded. You can't see more than 3 miles.
Question 7. Base camp, streets and trips, or paper maps?
Oh, base camp. I'm a big fan of base camp. I was an early adopter to base camp when they announced that map source was going away. I jumped right on base camp and started to learn it. And I like it. Works good for me. And is it the best? Well, right now there's nothing else. So,
yeah,
other than paper maps. When I was in the Army, I was in combat aviation operations, and I did mission planning. So I did that for helicopter flights and, multi-sortie, multi-ship planning. So base camp is, in my wheelhouse as far as those kinds of metrics and things to do. So I'm a big fan of base camp.
I have a theory that people who have a real visceral hatred of base camp never used map source. Because base camp is so much better. It may not be perfect, but it's so much better than map source.
Yeah. And it still works. And for the longest time, I had a little supplemental spreadsheet to go along with base camp, because base camp, you couldn't do any timing, and now you can time out a route. So,
question number 8. This is very appropriate for you. If you get a new bike today, what's the first Farkle you're going to put on it?
GPS.
Just one?
Yep. Oh, no. The first one would be the GPS.
Okay, the second one.
This is the first motorcycle I've ever had with an aux tank. In all my iron butt rallies, I've been fortunate to ride BMW R1200 GS Adventures, and the 2008 and 2013 had a 9-gallon gas tank, right?
Yep.
Well, I did the math, and to get, to use another 2.5 gallons up to the IBR 11.5 limit, that would only save me 45 minutes over a period of 11 days in terms of gas things. The conventional rule is carry as much gas as you can. But I didn't need that. So this little Janus motorcycle is the first motorcycle I've ever had with an auxiliary tank. And I don't know how to use one. I have to figure it out now, right? I'm putting all kinds of little farkles on it. I'm trying to turn this little scrambler into as much of an adventure touring bike as defined by the one that I currently ride, the BMW R1200 GS Adventure. It's 2016, that I can. I need all the things that I've always had on that guy, and that's my template.
So question 9, question 9 is what, and you've already answered this several times over, but I'm curious on the why part of this one. What are your current bikes and why? And I guess we've talked about the Janus quite extensively, but why the R1200 GS?
Well, I've been a big Harley guy. I've had 23 motorcycles, and 12 of those were Harley Davidson. My first Harley was a 67 XLCH, and it was the only one that ever leaked, by the way. So all you guys are saying Harleys are bad motorcycles. I thought they were all real good, especially the Road Glide. I had 3 Harley Davidson Road Kings, and I thought they were the best motorcycles Harley made until I got a Road Glide. But it's just not suitable for me for long distance riding. And the BMW R1200 GS Adventure, for the kind of riding I do, is the finest motorcycle I've ever owned. I tell that to people all the time. And they say, well, I like this one better. I said, that's okay. I mean, the BMW R1200 GS Adventure, the only mechanical issues I've ever had on all 4 of my GSs were I blew a U-joint on a 2008 and a U-joint on a 2016. Those are the only 2 things that I've ever had. And I've put over 160,000 miles. I've got over almost 140,000 on the 2016, and I blew a U-joint on it. Before the 2015 Iron Butt Rally, I replaced the drive shaft on my 2013 and never had an issue with it. And the guy that I gave the drive shaft to is still using it in his. So.
Question 10, who made your seat?
Sargent.
That's who I had on my GS.
Yep. And I put a ceramic bead rider set of beads on it. And that solves, I mean, I never have butt awareness. If I have any discomfort, it's always in my knees from having my feet in one position all the time. And and the nice thing about the GS is so tall, you can just dangle your feet off.
Yeah. Yeah. I ran that exact same setup with the bead rider and the Sargent seat. So what about on the Janus? Are they doing anything custom for you, or is it just the stock scrambler seat?
No, this is actually their Halcyon seat, their touring motorcycle seat, and they recently upgraded that, made it a little wider, a little bigger.
Okay.
And it's basically a metal pan with an Amish saddle maker seat on it that has about 3/4 of an inch of foam. And Chris at Bead Rider sent me a 12 by 12 set of ceramic beads, the Bead Rider Ultra, that I'm putting on there. And so far, I've got 50 miles on the motorcycle to get it inspected and then run up and down and test my GPS and all the rest of that stuff. And it feels different, of course.
Yeah.
But part of the training regimen that I'm going to put that little motorcycle through is to solve any comfort issues that I might have. But I'm going to try to keep it stock. It looks great, and it's in the exact position it needs to be in terms of leaning forward, leaning back, anything like that. It's just that it's going to be a different seat. Their standard seat is a banana seat.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the pictures on their website.
Yeah. So they did a lot of custom work for me. They put on my pannier, which is a tall 50 caliber ammo can. I've got another one coming that I'm putting on the other side. I was going to put a short one, but the short one looks kind of stupid. So my wife says, you just need to put a bigger one on there and just make it work.
All right. Question 11. What is your favorite or the most interesting location you visited on a motorcycle?
Oh, my God. That's a tough one, too. They're interesting. That begs a linear answer, right? You got the worst on one end of the line and the best on the other end of the line. And I always view the places that I go to as maybe spokes of a wheel of opportunities for different scenes. Like the overlook in San Francisco of the San Francisco Bay Bridge on the Northern Peninsula is just spectacular. So is, for a different reason, riding in Death Valley in the heat of the summer.
Yeah.
And so is Monument, riding up 193, I think it is, or 163 in Monument Valley, or through Arches National Park, or, they're all different. So it depends on my mood. I don't have a single place that I'd like to go back to. I like going down to Key West, even though it's a big slog for people on big bikes and have a lot of speed. But on this little Janus, during the upcoming Jacksonville party, I've signed up for the crazy Key West 1000, and I plan to do that on the Janus as one of his training rides.
Nice. All right, last question. How do you pass the time on a long ride? Listen to music, audiobook, do nothing?
All of that. I don't do audiobooks, but I subscribe to Amazon Music, and I have Google Music too, the free version. I've got a Samsung Galaxy 9 and unlimited data from Verizon, and I can pick up anything everywhere. So when I listen to music, I just pick one of the genres and just listen to that. Sometimes I just listen to the music in my head. On the clock, I generally just pay attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you have completed the LD dozen, and I can't thank you enough for talking to me today. This has been just very enlightening, and I cannot wait to hopefully get to see you at the 2021 Iron Butt Rally with that Janus. So anything you want to talk about before I let you go?
No, I just want to thank you and your audience for listening to me ramble on. And I'm just a normal long-distance motorcycle rider. There are people out there with more interesting stories than mine, but I appreciate you asking me about mine.
Well, if you'd like to get in contact with me, there's lots of ways you can do it. Easiest way is to head over to the website, www.longridersradio.com. And hey, another big thank you to the folks over at DiscountRamps.com for their support on this episode. Remember, DiscountRamps.com offers a huge selection of power sports products for your ATV, UTV, motorcycle, and more. Everything you need to load, haul, or transport your power sports toys. Long Riders Radio listeners can save 15% with coupon code LONG, and that's LONG, over at DiscountRamps.com. And as always, we need to thank this show's founder, Mr. Michael Cox. I was talking to Mike the other day, and he mentioned he had gone on a ride the other night. And I said, hey, Mike, what's it like riding in Oklahoma at night? And he said,
Oklahoma in the middle of the night, past midnight is a miserable place to ride.
Ride safe, everyone.